So here is Israel simultaneously fighting off terror attacks from Hamas, the Hezbollah terrorist army in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, and Iran itself, plus a gaggle of Iranian-backed militias in places like Syria and Iraq. It's now just had 6 Jews executed in cold blood on top of that, and that is exactly when Britain decides, well, this is the perfect time to say it can't help Israel defend itself. They're all criminals. Joining me from London is writer, broadcaster and columnist Esther Krakue. Esther, look, I don't expect you to be as strong as me or passionate as me in Israel's defence, but I've got to say, this timing seems to me absolutely disgusting. Hamas and Iran will be celebrating when even the mass murder of Jewish hostages will not stop Britain from punishing Israel instead.
Well, this is one of the things that many were scared of when Labour, won the majority in Parliament and David Lammy was announced the new Foreign Secretary. It was exactly these types of tone-deaf, unhelpful, illogical moves that we were worried about because, this could just be the beginning. Since 2021, the UK has exported about £17 billion worth of weapons to countries with proven human rights abuses, like Qatar, like Bahrain, like Saudi Arabia, like Turkey, like Egypt. And yet the UK government hasn't seen fit to ban any sort of weapon sales to these countries. But when Israel is fighting a war, just 2 days after you saw these hostages murdered in cold blood, this is when David Lammy chooses to. And he didn't even say that because they're the risk of humanitarian or human rights abuse. He just said there are allegations of it. So countries with proven human rights record abuses, we're not going to ban weapon sales to them. But a country that's fighting a war, a very contentious war, that's what's going to happen. And there are many people that are just ashamed to be British today, just because it doesn't make sense. It's illogical, it's inconsistent, and it negatively affects Britain's reputation worldwide. And now we're thinking not just about sort of Britain's attitude, the new government's behavior towards Israel. What's going to happen if Trump wins the White House in November? Are they going to scupper any trade deals just because they don't like the big orange man? There are wider implications of actually negatively affecting our relationship with our allies that go beyond ideologues and activists like David Lammy. And the reality is the UK and Israel will exist much longer after Keir Starmer and his ministers are booted out of government. But what happens to the relationship between the two countries when you can have officials like this not understand the nuances and the delicacies of a conflict like this? No one that I've spoken to disagrees that moving forward, Hamas needs to not be in the equation, that they cannot have any role in the region moving forward. No one disagrees with the fact that we want the fighting to end and for the hostages to be returned and for peace to be restored. But to do this, you're actually undermining any sort of long-lasting peace process because you basically just said Israel is guilty. And what happened to innocent until proven guilty?
Well, it also shows, Esther, that if you take hostages and kill them, you get a reward, you get a result. And I have to say, Boris Johnson, former Prime Minister, has blasted the government for doing this. But honestly, it is just so depressing. Esther, I'm sure, like me, you find nothing more refreshing than watching a socialist enjoying the perks of power. But I have to say there's something sinister in this one. Jess Phillips is a minister in your Labor government, very pro-Palestinian, and she had to go for a treatment at Birmingham Hospital and says, I got through because of who I am. Also, the doctor who saw me was Palestinian, as it turns out. Almost all the doctors in Birmingham seem to be. And he was sort of like, I like you. You voted for a ceasefire in Israel, in Gaza. I got through quicker. Now, Esther, I wonder who she pushed out of the queue that was ahead of her and whether these doctors would even treat Jews. What's the reaction to this been?
I think there's something quite telling about the fact that she felt confident enough to say this before she knew that the Labour sort of HQ will scupper to try and modify her statements so that it doesn't look as blatantly shameless as it is. But the reality is, I've worked with Jess Phillips. I've done some shows with her. She, like every other politician, knows where her bread is buttered. This is a woman that has been charged with progressing women and girls' rights in the UK and protecting them against sort of mainly sexual-based violence. But she had nothing to say about the fact that she was heckled when she'd won her seat again just last month by a bunch of misogynists who happened to be of a certain ilk. I'm sure we both know. So, the fact that she was able to say this comfortably is even more worrying because she knows that there's certain people that will not see anything wrong with now sort of the extension of tribalism extending to healthcare provision. I mean, can you imagine a doctor saying that he wasn't going to treat, he or she wasn't going to treat a person that was Jewish, for example, because they did not support a ceasefire or whatever other conditions they were. It is a complete
It's just
disaster,
sick.
and it's just discouraging and
it's sick.
disheartening.
Oh, to say the least, absolutely. Esther Krakue, great to talk to you. Thanks for your time.